Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're peeling back the layers of John le Carré's absolute espionage masterpiece, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. We're going to dive into exactly how this story completely redefined the spy genre and expose the very real anatomy of institutional decay. Because, this isn't just a story about finding a spy. Actually, it's more like a forensic study of human frailty, betrayal, and the complex systems we build to protect ourselves.
Let's jump right in with this incredibly explosive hook from le Carré himself. In his final major interview, he perfectly set the gritty, unglamorous tone of the reality he constructed. He said, and I quote, "With the stuff I'm writing, they think, oh Christ, I hope I'm not him." While other spy thrillers of the era were selling this glamorous, globe-trotting fantasy, le Carré was selling a suffocating, deeply human reality. And as you're about to see, that specific reality is exactly what makes this narrative so enduring.
So, here's our briefing dossier for today. We'll start with the anti-Bond espionage, move into the language of the gaze, look at designing Cold War paranoia, break down the Smiley principle, and finally, examine a legacy of betrayal.
Okay, Section 1, the anti-Bond espionage.
You've really got to think about the stark contrast between the hypermasculine James Bond archetype and the quiet, exhausted, paper-shuffling reality of George Smiley. Ian Fleming gave us Bond, right? The fast cars, the impossible gadgets, the crystal-clear moral victories. But le Carré, he gave us Smiley, an aging, bespectacled intelligence officer who has been forcibly retired. Smiley lives in this world of endless bureaucracy and deep moral compromise. I mean, the sheer exhaustion radiating from the man is palpable. He's worn down by decades of secrets. There are absolutely no laser watches here, just dim rooms, peeling paint, and this heavy, pervasive sense of national decline. It's literally the absolute antithesis of the Bond fantasy.
And that brings us to the top echelon of the circus, which is the British Secret Service. We've got Percy Allaline, the highly ambitious new chief, Bill Hayden, the charismatic polymath, Roy Bland, the rough-edged field operative, and Toby Esserhaus, the adaptable survivor. Now here's the kicker. One of these four men is a traitor, a mole, planted by the Soviet spy master Carle. Smiley has to hunt them down using nothing but his intellect. He's running a completely secret, behind-the-scenes paper chase. No gunfights, no high-speed chases. Just sifting through old, forgotten files, telephone intercepts, and whispered recollections.
Moving on to Section 2, the language of the gaze.
So you might notice something fascinating in Thomas Alfredson's Oscar-nominated 2011 cinematic adaptation. Gary Oldman's Smiley actually swims in a public pond with his bifocals on, and unlike his famous habit from the original novel, he never even takes them off to wipe them with his tie. It's a highly unusual, very specific behavior which begs the question, why doesn't George Smiley ever take his glasses off?
Well, it's because we, the audience, are placed directly behind those lenses. We're locked into his claustrophobic perspective. The primary action of this story isn't physical, it's the gaze. Think about that intense scene where Smiley debriefs the burned spy, Ricky Tarr. Smiley just sits perfectly still and drops this heavy, silent gaze right onto him. He uses silence like a physical weight, knowing full well that if you give a suspect an opening and just shut up, they're going to fill that silence with the truth. We only see the truth when Smiley sees it.
In a lot of ways, Smiley operates as the ultimate anti-algorithm. In an intelligence world that was racing toward automated data crunching, Smiley is purely analog. He proves that true intelligence comes from forensic patience. He dives headfirst into the systemic noise that high-speed systems would automatically discard as totally irrelevant. Just think about how quickly modern workplaces discard human nuance for the sake of efficiency, right? Smiley does the exact opposite. It's the forgotten memos, the contradictory testimonies, and those deeply human flaws hidden inside the noise that ultimately expose the traitor.
Let's dive into Section 3, designing Cold War paranoia.
To anchor the audience in the terrifying periphery of the Cold War, filmmakers relied on a very specific set of visual signifiers. It's a concept known as the Iron Curtain discursive unconscious. Basically, it's a visual shorthand. We're talking border checkpoints, bleak pine forests, rundown concrete housing. And this shorthand is so culturally ingrained, get this, the legendary 1979 BBC adaptation actually used a rundown post-industrial housing estate in Glasgow, Scotland to substitute for Czechoslovakia, and it worked perfectly. The visual cues just totally tricked our brains into feeling the oppressive chill of the Soviet bloc.
It's really cool to see how different adaptations built this paranoia. Think about the 1979 series, which relied on a literal labyrinth. It's full of cramped rooms, deep shadows, and that awful peeling institutional green paint. It perfectly mirrors a decaying British Empire. Now contrast that with the 2011 film. That version traps its characters in these transparent boxes, soundproofed orange modules, and grid-like open spaces. Even when they're in a massive, expansive room, the characters are framed behind glass or wire. It essentially turns the whole world into a checkerboard where everyone is just a pawn being watched.
Section 4. The Smiley Principle. So we've mapped out what we call the Smiley Principle, which is really the systemic decay of the circus. Step 1. The institution becomes completely obsessed with internal politics, effectively blinding itself to real, actual external threats. Step 2. Managing the narrative suddenly becomes way more important than the truth. And when a system does this, the mole isn't even just a traitor anymore. The mole becomes an inevitable glitch in a totally broken system, which leads to Step 3, the death of complexity. This is where bureaucratic self-preservation completely replaces genuine intelligence gathering.
And finally, Section 5, a legacy of betrayal.
It's honestly remarkable to track how this single story evolved over the decades. You start with the 1974 novel that totally shook the literary world. Then you have the 1979 television serial, which was so defining that a lot of readers still literally see Alec Guinness's face when they read the book today. And then the 2011 film came along and brought this highly stylized, visually compressed, and hyper-paranoid aesthetic to a brand new generation. Each version brilliantly adapts the exact same narrative of moral compromise, but tailors it to fit its own medium perfectly.
The absolute biggest takeaway you should have from this explainer is that betrayal, in Le Carré's world, isn't just a one-off event. It is a permanent condition. Just finding the mole doesn't magically fix everything. The very fact that the mole existed poisons the memory of the past. Every failed operation, every dead friend, it's all tainted. And for Smiley, it is devastatingly personal. The traitor, Bill Hayden, wasn't just selling state secrets, he was sleeping with Smiley's wife, Anne. The massive scale of espionage and the intimate pain of private cuckoldry collapse into a single act of colossal treachery. It forces everyone into a world where absolutely nothing can be taken at face value ever again. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. George Smiley found the truth by looking past the system, right? He used human patience, and he recognized the fatal flaws in institutional logic. Today, as our modern institutions rely more and more heavily on the closed loops of high-speed, automated intelligence and endless algorithmic noise, are we blinding ourselves? Are we accidentally building the perfect hiding spot for the next betrayal? Thank you so much for exploring the architecture of paranoia with me today. Keep asking the hard questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.